Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander down a path that hums with the rhythm of hoofbeats, where bells once rang across the endless dunes of an empire older than your favorite rerun of Game of Thrones. You're not scrolling on your phone anymore? Nope. You're squinting into a golden twilight, dry heat curling the edge of your robes. As you step into the dusty shoes of a royal courier in ancient Persia, it's quiet but not silent. You hear something, a faint tinkling. Not wind chimes, not wind either. Silver bells, teeny, deliberate, musical. They sway from a camel's harness somewhere ahead. That's no caravan of silk merchants. That's the sound of urgency. It's the sound of a message being delivered across an empire so vast. It made Rome look like a neighborhood watch. You sure you'd survive the desert on camelback with only a handful of water and a letter that might change the fate of a kingdom? I mean, you can't even keep your succulents alive. It's no judgment. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world now. Dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Standing on the edge of a road older than most languages still spoken today, the dust at your feet might once have clung to the sandals of a king or the hoof of a horse carrying the weight of empire. This is the Royal Road, HMORB, SHH, built not just for trade or tribute, but for words. It's the most important words. Orders, intelligence, secrets, pleas for mercy. Warnings of rebellion, apologies delivered too late. It stretches like a sunburned ribbon from Sardis in the west to Susa in the heart of Persia, snaking through mountain passes and scorching plains for over 2,500 kilometers. And you are walking it. Or at least, imagining you are. Because, thankfully, we're storytelling here, not sun-stroking. The road isn't empty. You see outposts every few miles, relay stations, with fresh horses and lean riders resting in the shadows. They're not chatting, they're conserving breath. You pass one who's sipping goat's milk from a pouch, another who's tightening the straps on his saddle, checking the tiny bell that dangles from its side. Yes, bells. Real, jingling, important bells. See, when these riders approached a village or station, they wouldn't shout or wave. They'd let the bells do the talking. That soft chime meant urgency. It meant move out of the way. It meant someone important is on the clock. There were no traffic jams in the desert, but make no mistake, if you didn't step aside for the courier's bells, you'd find out what Persian irritation looked like. Spoiler, it's mostly spear-shaped. And the pace? You think you're Amazon? Prime delivery is fast? These couriers could get a message across the entire empire in 7 to 9 days. That's faster than most group chats resolve dinner plans. Now, Persian Postal Service wasn't just a bunch of sweaty men galloping around for fun. It was called the Angarium, and it was an institution, an elegant, dusty, state-run logistical ballet. You'd get a fresh horse every stop, someone to hand off the sealed dispatch to if you've collapsed, and sometimes even a warm meal and a foot massage. Just kidding on that last part. Probably the real genius wasn't just the infrastructure, it was the trust. Every courier swore an oath, carried royal stamps, and knew that the message mattered more than they did. A lost letter could mean a missed battle, a broken alliance, or worse. A letter from your mother-in-law arriving late. Tragedy. You pause. At one of the relay stations, a little square structure with clay walls and a thatched roof. Inside, there's a ledger, a pot of ink thick as tar, and a wax seal kit engraved with the king's emblem.
Oh.
The rider who just arrived doesn't even dismount. He tosses the message to a waiting partner, drinks once, and rides off again. No selfies, no stories, just history in motion. And what's written on those messages, you wonder? Well, sometimes it's military orders. Move troops east, put down rebellion in Bactria. Sometimes it's court gossip. Of Lydia wore what to the banquet, and sometimes it's dull. Wheat quotas, census data. Bureaucracy so dry you'd think it came pre-dehydrated. But that's the magic of it. Every dusty scroll has potential. It could be the spark. Or it could be the snooze, and right now, you're part of that world. You feel the sun burning low on the horizon, the kind of heat that bakes thoughts into clay. You watch another rider disappear down the line. Bells jingling softly like the last line of a lullaby written in silver. A fly buzzes near your ear. You swat it away and think, people built an empire on this road. On patience, on precision, on horses that didn't whine about over time. You turn to continue walking, the dry earth crunching beneath your sandals. There's a rhythm to it now. A kind of heartbeat. Bell, hoof, dust. Bell, hoof, dust. You start to hear stories whispering up from the road itself, but one thing's certain. You'll never look at a package delivery the same way again, and that's only the beginning. The road doesn't change much, and that's the point. You keep walking, following the same dusty ribbon across Persia that thousands of others once did. The sun creeps lower, shadows stretching longer across the cracked earth. You start to notice how smooth the ground beneath your feet is. Not rocky. It's not jagged. It's worn down from centuries of feet, hooves, wheels, carving their path in the same direction. That's when you realize this is more than a road. It's a ritual. And rituals, as you'll find, are the lifeblood of empire. You pass a marker stone crumbling but still standing like an elder refusing to retire. It marks the distance to Susa, the glittering nerve center of the Persian Empire. If Persepolis was where kings were crowned and feasts were held, Susa was where pens scraped parchment and voices whispered behind silk screens. It's where the orders were born. And this road, the royal road, was there. Bloodstream. You pause and listen again for the bells. Faint, steady, closer. Then you see him. A rider thundering toward you. Ows! Hooves kicking up clouds like steam rising from boiling water. The horse is lean, ribs showing, but fast. The rider is hunched forward, eyes squinting beneath a strip of cloth tied around his head, face sunburned and tight with determination. The bell at his saddle rings not in a cute jingle, but in that same crisp rhythm you're starting to recognize. It's the heartbeat of empire. He doesn't stop, doesn't wave, just flashes past in a blur of leather, sweat, and dust, leaving a pressure in the air like thunder rolling past. You blink and he's already shrinking on the horizon. That was the Angaros, the courier. And the moment he passed, history shifted just a little. These riders weren't random folks with strong thighs. They were government men, elite, trained, sworn to secrecy and speed. It said they could cover nearly 200 kilometers per day, thanks to the relay stations set up along the route. That's about 5 marathons, in case you're keeping score from your comfy bed. And each rider? He didn't do the whole road. No, that would have been madness and probably led to a lot of very sweaty, dead Persians. Instead, each station had a fresh horse and a fresh man. One hands the sealed message to the next, then takes a gulp of fermented goat milk or honey water, pats the horse, and waits for the next run. It's like FedEx. If FedEx riders also had to dodge lions, you keep moving, and the road rises gently. Into a plateau, the wind gets sharper, cooler. You pass a small alcove where a family of traders has set up camp. They're cooking something in a clay pot, the scent of cardamom and mutton mixing with dust. They wave lazily at your tunic marks you as a traveler, not a threat to end. They've seen hundreds like you. You ask, almost absent-mindedly, how long it would take to send a message to Babylon. One of them chuckles and says, 10 days. If the horses don't eat each other, he's joking probably. But what's not a joke is how tightly scheduled these couriers were. Herodotus, bless his overdramatic Greek soul, once wrote that neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night would stop them. Sound familiar? Yeah, the modern postal service borrowed that line. And while historians love to argue about whether those conditions were actually endured by all riders, one thing's clear: missing a deadline wasn't just frowned upon, it was a royal offense. And what happens when you offend a king known for building cities and boiling people alive? Let's just say you'd wish the horse had trampled you first. Some historians still debate whether this system was truly the fastest in the world at the time. Others argue about who invented the first relay mail. China had their own versions after all, so did Egypt, but none of them had a road so consistent. so purpose-built for messaging across a vast empire. This road was like an early version of fiber optic cable. If you squint hard and ignore the camels, and speaking of camels, don't let the romantic desert movies fool you. Horses were the stars here. Camels were fine for hauling goods across endless dunes, sure, but they're grumpy, unpredictable, and slower than a hungover donkey in summer. Horses, though, sleek, fast, loyal, the Teslas of ancient Persia as you crest a hill. The sun finally dips below the distant Zagros Mountains, turning the sky a moody violet. You find a flat rock and sit, your legs aching in that satisfying, earned way. The air smells like cinnamon and wind-blown ash. The stars begin to blink on, one by one, like the Empire lighting its lanterns in the dark. You try to imagine being a courier, alone, hungry, rushing through the wilderness with only a small pouch carrying orders that could make or break a province. All for what? A coin? A crust of bread? The honor of being part of the machine? Maybe something simpler. The thrill of knowing that you are the reason. Two sides of the world are speaking, and as the wind tugs at your sleeves and the bells echo, once more in the far distance, you feel it that strange. Quiet magic that only lives in roads like this. You're not just walking through history anymore. You're inside it, and it's only getting deeper from here. The bells are gone. No faded into the hush of night, like the last note of a lullaby played on a silver string. You rise, brushing the dust from your robe, and begin walking again beneath a sky so wide it feels like it might tip over and bury you and stars. There's a strange comfort in being alone out here. No walls, no clocks, no noise but the whisper of wind across stone. You start to hear the things modern life muffles, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the chirp of desert insects, the creak of worn leather as you shift your pack. You're not bored, you're aware, and you begin to realize how this road trained the Persians not just to travel, but to listen. Then, in the dark, something soft and bright glints from the edge of the path. You kneel. It's a bell, a tiny silver bell, no bigger than your thumb, half buried in the dirt, still attached to a thin leather strap. This may be dropped by a courier whose fingers trembled from exhaustion, or maybe left as a signal. You lift it and give it the gentlest shake. Sound is almost imperceptible, like frost cracking on a window. But it's there, and in it, a story. You remember what the trader said earlier? These bells weren't just decorative. They were essential. Each bell was tuned, yes, tuned to ring at a specific pitch, depending on the urgency of the message. No stamp, no sticker, just the sound. The higher the tone, the more important the contents. In a world without email headers or red exclamation marks, this was the closest thing to a push notification. And this one. A mid-range chime, not war urgent, but not trivial. Perhaps a message of reassignment, a shift in border patrol. Or maybe a request for more dates and honey wine in Susa, the empire. Like your favorite coffee shop had its needs. You slip the bell into your pouch not to steal it, but to carry its story forward, like the Angros once did. A little farther down the road, the terrain changes. It opens into a long, flat plain, marked by occasional pillars carved with cuneiform. You can't read them not fluently, but you recognize a symbol repeated often, a winged figure with a beard. That's Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism. You're now walking under divine observation. It's better fix your posture. These waymarkers weren't just for worship or ego. We're there to protect travelers, to reassure them that even in the emptiness, someone or something was watching. It wasn't just the terrain that posed danger. You come to an old relay station, half collapsed from time and weather. The wooden beams have rotted, but the stone hearth still holds the shape of past fires. You see hoofprints fossilized in packed dirt, carved into the wall, barely legible in the moonlight, a name. Just a first name, probably a rider. Maybe. A memorial. The wind shifts, and you catch the faintest scent burnt parchment. You turn and see a small fire pit. Someone's been here recently. You crouch beside the ashes. Blackened fragments of scrolls crumble between your fingers. Not many, only a few scraps. But why burn them? Fear? Secrecy? Or maybe betrayal? Here's where it gets a little eerie. There are rumors, persistent, whispered, that sometimes couriers went rogue, not often, but enough that royal scribes were taught to create redundant scrolls, with alternate copies sealed in different materials, leather, cloth, or even pressed wax. If one writer was compromised, another would still carry the word. A primitive version of your cloud backup, but with slightly higher risk of line attack. And that's not the weirdest part. Some messages were never written down at all. You start walking again. It's quicker now, chasing that thread in your thoughts. It's said that the most sensitive messages, the kind that could tip an empire, were delivered from memory, not carried, not copied, memorized, and not by just anyone. These were the Whisper Couriers' elite messengers, trained not just to ride and navigate, but to remember. They could recite entire decrees word for word, including names, dates, clauses, and ceremonial flourishes. They were walking dispatches, human USB drives, taught to forget everything else until the job was done. How were they trained? No one knows for sure. Some say they drank special infusions made from lion's tongue and bitter pomegranate skin to sharpen memory. Others say they used repetition drills inside echo chambers carved into cliffsides, an ancient form of audio reinforcement. You smile. It sounds ridiculous, till you remember how many passwords you forget each week. And suddenly it seems, it's kind of genius. The moon is high now, casting the desert in a cold silver glaze. You see no one on the road, but that doesn't mean it's empty. You imagine one of those Whisper Couriers passing you in the dark. No bells, no scrolls. Just a face calm with knowledge, riding toward a king with the power to end or begin wars. Stored neatly between his ears. There's one more thing they say about those human couriers. They were never allowed to speak casually during a run. Not even small talk at the stations. Every word could overwrite the message, so they rode in silence, mouths shut tight, eyes forward. Just like you are now, the wind dies. Even the insects have gone still. And for a brief moment, the only sound is your heartbeat, matching the remembered rhythm of hooves and bells and whispered commands. And if you listen closely, deep under the hush of night, you might just hear someone reciting a forgotten message into the dark. The sun returned slowly, not with a bang, but with a sigh, easing itself over the edge of the world like a curtain rising on a familiar stage. You didn't sleep. You're not tired either. The road has its own kind of energy. Something ancient. Something whispering just beneath your feet. Like it's remembering you. To dot as the light warms the sand, a shadow appears in the distance, another relay station. This one's still standing. Solid, squat, and built of thick mud brick, with a domed roof and iron brackets where lanterns once hung. You quicken your pace, drawn forward by the scent of horses and something sweeter. Leather, oil, and ROSEWATR. Inside, it's dim and cool. The thick walls block out the heat. You see them immediately. Scrolls. Dozens of them, neatly tied and labeled in script so precise, it looks etched by blade. They're wrapped in soft leather, the color of old almonds, and stacked in racks. Carved from cedar wood, and seated at the far end of the room, is a man. Thin, severe, and of course surrounded by ink. He doesn't look up. His stylus scratches across parchment, steady as breath. You take a cautious step forward. He finishes a line, sets the stylus down, and then glances at you. Scribe. He says, not as a question, but as a category, or courier. You hesitate? He shrugs. Doesn't matter. They're both in the same business. You approach the table, your eyes caught by a small, exquisite seal, a chunk of obsidian carved with the royal insignia lion chasing the sun. The scribe notices you looking and raises an eyebrow. Messages don't travel without trust, he murmurs. And trust doesn't exist without a seal. You nod, of course. In this system, the seal was sacred. More than handwriting. More than voice. more than the man himself. It was the fingerprint of the Empire. Every scroll left this room stamped, in wax or clay-hardened proof that what was inside was real. But even as he speaks, something in the air feels ... tense. A little off. You glance around and notice another table, half covered with shredded parchment. Some burned at the edges, some deliberately cut. The scribe follows your gaze. Not all messages arrive intact, he says quietly. Some are intercepted, some never meant to be read. He rises and walks over to a small chest, unlocking it with a key that hangs around his neck. Inside, he pulls out a scroll unlike the others, this one wrapped not in leather, but in what looks like silk. It glows. Faintly in the sunlight, threads of gold woven into the fabric. He doesn't hand it to you. He just holds it gently. This, he says, was meant for the queen. You blink, the queen? He smiles at your surprise. Yes, we had queens. And no, they didn't just sit around wearing jewelry. Some of them ran entire networks of intelligence. Some historians believe this whole system, he gestures to the room, was reorganized under a woman. You wait, but he doesn't name her. Maybe because history forgot. Or maybe because even now, some names still carry power. Of course, he continues, others say she never existed, that she was a myth to explain how suddenly the system became so efficient. He shrugs again. Historians love arguing. Keeps them employed, you smile. Of course they do, but the truth lingers, soft and tempting. Could it be that behind the gruff riders and sweating horses and dusty scrolls, a queen was pulling the strings? Designing routes, codes, maybe even assigning riders not just by speed, but by loyalty? You watch as he rewraps the scroll and returns it to the chest. Some things, he says, aren't meant to move. And then he says, no more. You leave the station as the sun climbs higher, throwing sharp shadows across the sand. You think about that queen, about how power doesn't always wear armor or carry swords. Sometimes it rides beneath the surface, efficient and absolutely essential. You pass a ridge and find yourself looking down over a wide valley, dotted with scrub brush and lazy swaying date palms. Far below, a caravan inches along, camels swaying, banners fluttering, but your eyes go to the riders flanking it too in particular, slim, fast, and with bells that glitter in the light. They're not guarding the treasure, they're the treasure. The messages they carry might be worth more than all the spices in those sacks, and one of them glances up, just for a second, as if he sees you even from this distance. Maybe he does. You nod and continue walking. The bell in your pouch jingles. Softly, history is rarely loud, but it always finds a way to deliver itself. The valley behind you grows small in the distance, swallowed by haze and heat. The road climbs again, narrowing between sharp ridges of ochre stone. You'll find yourself walking slower, not from exhaustion, but because the air feels different here. Denser, heavier, as if the mountains are listening, and they are. You round a bend and nearly stumble into a low wooden post driven into the ground. Faded paint, deep scratches, a sign. You brush the dust away and see a strange carving, 2 arrows crossed over a bird with outstretched wings. The symbol of the Imperial Watch, not soldiers, it's not guards, but the shadows of the Postal Road. You're in spy country now. Not all messages were written, you remember, and not all couriers delivered scrolls. Some carried nothing. Some were the message. You tread more carefully now, ears pricked for movement, but it's silent, save for the faint whine of wind funneling between the cliffs. Still, your pace slows, as if your legs know what your mind is only now catching up to. This stretch of road was notorious. In the early days of the Empire, rival tribes and disgruntled satraps, governors, for the recordant, evil wizards learned to ambush messengers here, cut off the road, intercept the couriers, and boom, secrecy compromised. It didn't take long for the Empire to respond, but instead of sending more soldiers, they sent ghosts, trained operatives, silent riders, men and women who knew how to slip into a village, extract an informant, or a place a scroll might run without anyone noticing. They weren't paid by the mile, they were paid by what they didn't say. And as you walk, you see hints of them everywhere. A series of flat stones, too perfectly aligned to be natural. A string of tiny holes bored into the rock face almost. Invisible unless the sun hits them just right, and then, the most telling sign, a narrow stone outcrop shaped like a bird's head facing east. It's a signal, an old one, meant to mark a safe drop point for verbal intelligence. You sit beside it and listen. The silence is thick now. Not empty, just patient. You imagine a rider pausing here centuries ago, whispering into the rocks, revolt in Arya. Trade route to India compromised. The satrap of Ecbatana is entertaining bribes. You smile. Some secrets never change. But it wasn't just the spies and secrets that made this section of the road famous. It was the weather. You tilt your head back and look at the sky. Perfect blue, unmarred. But in the spring, it's total chaos. This region was infamous for sandstorms, walls of wind and grit that rolled through the mountains like angry gods. Couriers would ride blind, shielding their eyes with strips of linen, relying on the sound of their own bells to avoid veering off the edge. That's why many of them began attaching tassels, bright cloth markers, or feathers to the horns of their saddles. Not decorative, practical. A burst of color in the swirl of yellow nothingness, blinking light in a pre-electric world. Some even smeared their scrolls in oils of mind. Pine or pressed poppy to keep the parchment supple and resistant to the scouring wind. The messages might get bent, but they wouldn't crumble. And yet, they still lost some. One famous case. Well, famous if you hang out with obsessive historians, tells of a courier blown off course for 3 days. By the time he arrived in Susa, the war he was warning about had already ended. The king read the scroll, blinked twice, and then ordered the man to write down everything he saw during the delay. Why? Because that information was now more valuable than the original message. Grin. Even mistakes had utility. A little farther up the path, you see another relay hut, though this one's different. It's fortified, almost like a miniature fortress. Slits for archers, thick doors, a bell tower at the top with no bell. This was a message vault. In dangerous times when travel was impossible, certain messages were locked here. The courier would ride this far, secure the documents in clay jars or bronze cylinders, and wait for the weather or to pass. Only then would the next leg of the journey begin. You imagine being one of those couriers, days stuck in the same hut, listening to the wind scream outside, fingers tapping on a sealed container holding truths that could ignite or calm a kingdom. Maybe they read them, maybe they didn't, but the trust remained. You walk past the vault and back onto open ground. Sky is brighter now. The heat returns, curling the horizon like a stovetop mirage. You stop to drink from your water skin and wipe the sweat from your eyes. That's when you spot it. Something moving ahead, low to the ground. You tense, crouch. Bandits? Wolves? No, it's a man, but not on horseback. He's walking. No bells, no scrolls, just bare feet, and an empty pouch. You freeze as he approaches. His eyes meet yours. They're calm, deep, but tired. So tired. You nod at him. He nods back, then he walks. Past, silent as a whisper, gone in moments. Some messages are delivered without a sound. The man with the empty pouch vanishes behind you like a mirage absorbed back into the sand. You turn once more to glance his way, but the road is empty. No footprints, no dust trail, just stillness. Maybe he was real, maybe not. Question it. Not on this road. You keep moving, and the landscape shifts against utterly at first. The sand thins. More stones appear underfoot. The sky softens into a hazy gray. And then you see them. Low walls of brick and fragments of columns, jutting from the ground like broken fingers. The ruins of a postal station, ancient even in ancient times. Burned, toppled, but still whispering. You step carefully over the collapsed archway. There's no roof, just open air and wind threading through the bones of the building. The room is divided into narrow alcoves, its once holding riders, supplies, maybe a goat or two. Persian efficiency knew no bounds. But it's the farthest chamber that catches your eye. Inside, a stone table, cracked, covered in dust. And carved into its surface, deep and deliberate, a symbol not used in any other station you've seen so far. A crown, set within a pair of wings. You brush away the dust and stare. This was a royal chamber. Not just for riders, but for the architects of the entire network. The ones who planned the rotations, who encoded messages, who chose which riders got which missions, possibly. Who erased those who failed. There are no documents left, no scrolls, no tablets. But something else rests. In the center of the table, a shallow dish, carved from green stone, filled with small, flat tokens. On each, a name and a single line of script. You pick one up and read. He delivered the sun and vanished in its light. Memorial. You're standing in a room of ghosts, each token a eulogy, each name a story, one token, slightly larger than the rest. Bears no name at all, just a seal. The same lion chasing the sun emblem you saw in the obsidian stamp in the earlier station. This one might be hers. You feel it in your gut. The whispers about the invisible queen. The one who reshaped the system without ever placing a boot on the road. No crown, no throne, just ink and strategy and invisible strings stretching across the empire. Of course, historians argue about her. Some say she was a myth and excuse to explain the sudden expansion and efficiency of the network around. 480 BCE, others believe she was a real person, a queen regent ruling while her husband was away at war, or perhaps a daughter of the king, who never officially took power, but held it nonetheless. And still others whisper she was not one woman, but a lineage's secret order of royal women, training each other in code, logistics, and surveillance. A matrilineal mind hidden behind patriarchal curtains. The truth? Lost in dust and time, but this chamber is real. The seal is real. Something about the way the wind stops moving while you're here makes it clear. This was not just a footnote. This was a command center. You step back out into the sun, squinting. The ruins behind you fall silent again. You press on. The next few miles pass in a blur. The rhythm returns. Step, dust, breath. You reach another marker stone and sit beside it for a moment, letting your legs rest. From here, you can see the shimmer of a river in the distance, thin and winding. The next station can't be far, but what you can't shake is the thought. What did she write? What kind of messages would a woman ruling in secret send down this line? You imagine, divert grain to the northern provinces. Prepare for flood. Replace governor. Quietly. Use scroll C12. Ignore tribute from Babylon. Let them stew. Send poets to the front. Morale is dropping. Not declarations, not war cries, but precision, control. And that's when it clicks. Why the Angarium was so effective. Why this road never failed, not even when the empires that used it did. Because someone understood that information was not a shout, was a whisper. The road taught people to listen, to observe, to deliver without fanfare. No parades, no statues. Just the knowledge that your feet moved the fate of nations and no one would remember your name, except maybe her. A gust of wind blows down the road behind you, warm and sudden. You don't flinch, you let it pass. Then, faintly, just as it fades, you hear it again, a bell, but this time, very soft, very high, almost like a laugh. You follow the sound, unsure if it was ever real or just your imagination tying itself in clever little knots. Either way, it leads you onward down from the hills, past the riverbank, and into flatter land where dry reeds rattle in the breeze, like someone whispering secrets you're not supposed to hear. This stretch of the royal road was known for its perils, not the grand kind, no invading armies or collapsing mountains here, but subtler threats. The kind you don't see until they're biting your calf. You spot the warning signs carved into stone markers. Lion, scorpion, and one that just looks like a very angry blob. You assume it means rebel ambush ahead, or beware of violent jelly. It's unclear, but the threats were real. This was the section where couriers vanished. A ridge here, a bend in the road there, and you'd be gone. Swallowed by the land, so the Empire responded not by walling off the road, but by arming it with traps, outposts, and an ingenious system of bell signals unlike anywhere else in the network. You see a raised wooden arch ahead, like a crude gate. Hanging from it are 4 bells, each a different size and metal, okay? As you pass beneath, you pause and brush your fingers along the bottom of one. It makes a low, mournful chime, like a cow calling home in a thunderstorm. But in the past, these bells had meaning. If a rider passed through, they'd ring the bells in a specific pattern, depending on what they saw. 1 ring equals road clear, 2 equals rider wounded, 3 equals enemy near, 4 equals I ate something suspicious. Proceed with caution. Okay, maybe not that last one. The point is, this system let riders warn each other. And since the bells could be heard for miles on a still morning, they often saved lives, but not always. You come across a small shrine beside the road. Just a pile of stones, really, with a curved dagger thrust into the center and a scroll tied in faded red ribbon. You don't touch it. This is a memorial for one of the lost. You read the inscription chiseled into the stone beneath. He rode fast, but not fast enough. Yikes. You step around it with a quiet nod, not out of fear, out of respect. Because this part of the system, the danger was just as sacred as the seals and scrolls. If anything, it proved how seriously they took their task, and so did the precautions, in especially rough patches. Riders traveled in pairs. One carried the message, the other carried a dummy scroll, identical on the outside, filled with nonsense on the inside. That way, if they were ambushed, they could surrender the message and flee while the decoy distracted the attackers. In fact, the decoy messages were sometimes intentionally funny. Now, one scroll found centuries later contained nothing but a list of fake palace rules, including no cats allowed on the royal rug. Do not speak to the king until he has consumed at least 1 fig. The use of glitter in diplomatic documents is forbidden. Even ancient empires had a sense of humor. But for every clever trick, there was real danger. Some couriers went missing entirely, and their scrolls of found at all were discovered years later, buried in caves or stuffed inside looted saddlebags. Far from the route, one legend tells of a messenger named Darius. Yes, like the king, but no relation, who disappeared in this very stretch. They say his message was so important, was encrypted in 3 layers. One written in code, one written backward, and one etched on a stone tablet so small it could be hidden inside a goat's horn. The goat, by the way, made it back. Darius did not. You walk a little faster now, not out of fear, but anticipation. The more you learn, the more you realize this system wasn't just about transportation, it was storytelling. A story told through movement, repetition, and ritual. Its rider playing a part, each station a chapter, scroll a line in the Empire's great, dusty script, and you're starting to feel like a character too. You reach the edge of the dangerous zone just as the land begins to rise again. Hills ahead. Another station, maybe, or just more silence. But before you go, you turn around and look back down the long, flat stretch behind you. And for a moment, just a moment, you think you see a figure far in the distance emerging from the haze. Bareheaded, thin, holding nothing but a scroll pressed to his chest like a secret. He doesn't dare speak aloud, and then he's gone, like a paragraph cut from the page. You climb, not in a dramatic mountaineering sort of Wayno ropes or heroic theme music here, but slow, steady, and increasingly winded. The road curls upward, threading through narrow passes and scrub-dotted slopes, a quiet ascent into thinner air and quieter thoughts. The terrain is gentler than the rebel-ridden lowlands behind you. Softer soil, fewer hiding places for danger, but the silence feels different here, not threatening, reverent. And then, like a reward for your efforts, the station appears. It's not a ruin. It's not abandoned. It's pristine. Marble pillars line the entrance. A stone path sweeps inward, toward a courtyard surrounded by whitewashed walls. There's a fountain, still trickling water into a shallow basin filled with smooth river stones. And benches, actual benches carved with floral patterns and padded with what might be. Velvet? You pause, confused. A mirage? Nope. You smell it now. Milk, fresh bread, rose oil. This is one of the luxury rest stops, a rare gem among the hundreds of utilitarian relay posts along the Royal Road. Not built for couriers, but for envoys, diplomats, governors, scribes with titles too long to fit on one line. People who carried not only messages, but also influence. And if a regular courier had the stamina of a horse and the diet of a famine survivor, these guests lived a different reality. You walk inside and find cushions, delicate ceramic cups, a tray of dried fruits sitting in a nook near the wall. No one's here now, but someone was, recently. You sit, cushion exhales beneath you like it's been waiting. A courier could pause here for the night if space allowed, or even for a few hours to bathe, rest, maybe indulge in one of the herbal treatments offered in the back rooms. Yes, you heard that right. Spa stops, courtesy of the Persian state. They believed a rested messenger was a faster one, revolutionary. You peer into one of the side rooms and see a shallow copper tub. Bottles of scented oils line the shelf. Lavender, chamomile, even one labeled in ancient script that might translate to horse muscle liniment, not for humans. Tempting, you resist. But not before splashing your face in the cool water from the fountain. It stings just a little, mineral-rich, brisk. You feel instantly alert, and also somehow older, like you've earned this comfort. You sit again, nibbling. A fig from the tray tastes like sunlight soaked in syrup. The kind of thing only someone who hasn't had processed sugar in a few weeks can fully appreciate. And as you chew, you spot something glinting on the floor beneath the nearest bench. You reach down. It's a scroll case. Not fancy, just bronze. Capped with wax. But heavy. Still sealed. Someone left it here, or hid it, or meant to pass it off discreetly. You don't open it. Not because you're scared. Because that's not how this works. The seal isn't yours to break. Instead, you turn the case over in your hands, noticing a faint engraving along the rim. It reads, "He who carries rest carries fire." You try to make sense of it. A proverb? A warning? A compliment? Then you remember some messages weren't just information. They were morale, sent not to inform, but to sustain. Encouragement from a queen to her generals. A poem from one satrap to another to maintain the illusion of peace. A reminder, too, a weary province that the empire still saw them soft power delivered in hard metal. You return the case exactly where you found it and rise, wiping your hands on your tunic. Outside, the wind has picked up again, rustling the reeds around the courtyard like applause. You take one last sip from the fountain and step back out into the sun. It's warmer now. The wind's softer. You feel something shift inside you, not dramatic, just clearer, because, for all the urgency, all the danger, the Persian postal system was built on rhythm, not speed. Horses rotated. Messages passed. Riders rested. Empires didn't demand chaos. They demanded continuity. Even Haran, the edge of empires, someone believed in the value of comfort, of hospitality, of placing a soft place to land between the gallops. You glance. Back one last time, then turn your feet forward, once more into the dust. You've walked far. The sun has rolled across the sky like a lazy eye, now blinking through thin clouds as afternoon stretches on. Your sandals are dust-caked. Your mind is quieter. And then you come upon a crossroads, not the bustling kind. With carts and merchants and confused tourists trying to barter in the wrong language? No. This one is quiet, fork in the road, marked only by an old wooden post with a single line carved in ancient script. To vanish is not to fail. You pause, because there's a story here. and you already know its shape. It starts, as many stories do, with a letter that never arrived, somewhere. Deep within the archives of Persepolis, there's a record of a missing dispatch and order meant to halt the movement of troops before a rebellion could turn into a full-blown war. The name of the courier? Unknown. The message never found. The consequence? One of the bloodiest clashes of the 5th century BCE. They blamed it on weather, or ambush, or poor routing. Some even blamed the gods, as people often do when the truth is too inconvenient. But the couriers whispered a different tale. They told of a man named Never Young, untested, full of pride and legs like steel rods. He was chosen for the mission because of his speed, his memory, and his absolute silence. They said he rode without stopping, changed horses faster than most could draw breath, and reached this exact crossroad in record time, but he never arrived. Some say he was ambushed, others that he turned. But those who knew the road best, the other couriers, they told a quieter, stranger version. They said never stopped because he couldn't, that the message he carried was so sensitive. It was embedded not in parchment, but in memory layered into verses, chants, and sense burned into cloth so his mind wouldn't let it fade, and that somewhere along this road, he simply disappeared. You stand at the fork now, one path continues, east toward Susa, the other veers south, toward the salt flats and forgotten oases. You look down both, stillness, dust, heat, and then you notice something just off the path, a cairn of stones. Too deliberate to be random. You step closer. Someone's etched a line into the topmost rock, almost faded. He was the scroll. That's all. No tribute, no poem, just a flat statement, quiet and devastating. You crouch beside it and trace the line with your fingers. If never existed, and, let's be honest, someone did, he's long gone. But the message? That part lingers, because this is the truth the Angarium lived by. The message mattered more than the man. You didn't ride for glory. You rode for continuity, for empire, for the quiet machinery of order that let people wake up in the morning and trust that their taxes would be counted, their borders patrolled, their enemies known by name, and that kind of trust. It demands sacrifice. You sit for a while beside Niver's cairn. You think of all the unnamed riders, those whose scrolls arrived safely while they didn't, who were remembered not in statues but in systems, not in verses but in velocity. And suddenly, the phrase on the marker post makes perfect sense. To vanish is not to fail. So maybe Never delivered the message. Or maybe he did and just didn't come back. After all, in this world, successful courier wasn't one who returned it. Was one who arrived. You rise slowly, stretch your legs, and keep walking. The air feels different now, a little cooler, a little kinder, and the next bend in the road. You walk toward it knowing that somewhere up ahead, someone's waiting, and perhaps they're still listening. The road straightens. After so many twists and hills, there's something unsettling about a stretch this straight. It's like it's daring you to look too far ahead. If you follow it anyway, feet tracing the worn groove carved by thousands of others. Before you, and then you hear it, chanting, faint, melodic, coming from the direction of a low structure crouched in the middle of a clearing, half buried in the earth. You approach slowly, stepping down into the cool shadow of the entrance, and realize this is not a postal station. It's a training hall inside. The walls are carved with intricate patterns designed to echo sound, low hums, bouncing softly across the chamber. There are benches arranged in circles, not rows, and stone basins filled with herbs and soot. You smell myrrh, juniper, something sharp like ink, left too long in the sun. And standing at the center is a trainer, her voice rhythmic and firm, reciting something to the group seated around her. Line 3, to the governor of Lydia. With firmness, line 4. Use the second clause only if winter has passed. A few of the students echo her. Others hesitate. She taps a stick against the floor. Again, no breaks. Breath between clauses only. You are not here to read. You are here to remember. You don't speak. You just watch. These are the memorists, the backbone of the secret communication network, trained not in writing but in retention. human scrolls, mental libraries. Mouths closed until they reach their target. You shift your weight and accidentally crunch a pebble. The trainer glances up. "Courier or spy?" she asks. You're starting to notice that people don't really say hello on this road. You offer a shrug. She gives the faintest smirk. Then observe and learn what the page cannot teach. She gestures, and the students begin again, this time faster. Phrases tumbling from their mouths like chants from an ancient choir. No one looks at paper. No one even blinks. It's all inside. You wonder how they store it, what techniques they use. And you notice some are chewing herbs. Others hold tiny, carved stones smooth from use, flipping them in their hands in rhythm with the lines they speak. One student suddenly fumbles, his mouth freezes his mid-phrase. A pause. The others keep going. The trainer walks over, places a hand on his shoulder. "Repeat. What you know," she says gently. "Not what you fear you've forgotten." Okay. And he does. Flawlessly, you nod to yourself. You've read that before, well? Heard it in some documentary narrated by a voice like a sleepy lion? Memory under stress becomes brittle. But the Persians, apparently, had methods for softening it again. The trainer turns to you. "Do you want to try?" she asks. You hesitate, but then she recites a single sentence and says, "Repeat it after me." You close your eyes. Her voice echoes again, clear and firm. "Truth travels in silence, not thunder." You repeat it, and you don't forget it, not because it's dramatic, but because it's simple, because it feels true. And that, you realize, is the real technique. The words must be shaped so the mind wants to keep them. You step outside after thanking her, head buzzing not with noise but clarity. The system didn't rely only on roads and seals and riders. It relied on people who could carry the word in their bones, people who knew that a message is more than a sentence. It's a responsibility, and that's why they memorized them. Not because they couldn't write, but because sometimes writing was the risk. If a scroll was lost, stolen, burned, it was gone. But a voice could wait, a voice could hide, and a voice could return. You pick up your pace now, energized. The wind shifts behind you, catching the scent of smoke and something else metal. Ahead, the road dips, and you glimpse the next phase of the network, the sealers, the ones who made sure memory and ink alike arrived intact. But that's a story for another stretch of road. For now, you hum to yourself under your breath. Truth travels in silence, not thunder. Suddenly, the journey doesn't feel so long. You descend the hill with that phrase still echoing in your mind. Truth travels in silence, not thunder. It sits there like a stone in your pocket, light enough to carry, heavy enough to matter. The air grows warmer again, drier. You see the shimmer of heat. It's curling off the ground like invisible silk. The next station is not built into stone or shaded under trees. It rises boldly from the earth in white clay and gleaming bronze. But unlike the rest, it's not long or wide. It's compact, circular, almost ceremonial. You know immediately what it is: a ceiling house. You step through the low archway into a room lit entirely by natural light. Dim slits in the ceiling letting sunlight spill down in gold ribbons. In the center sits a large stone table, and upon it seals. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Bronze, obsidian, clay molds. Wow, even a few carved from colored glass. Some are carved with lions, some with suns. A few with symbols you don't recognize, perhaps. Personal sigils from officials long faded into the past. A woman greets you not with a nod, not with words, but by sliding a wax tablet across the table toward you. Next to it, she places a tiny golden stamp and a bowl of warm wax dot message. Seal, identity. You pick up the stamp. It bears no name, only a stylized flame inside a circle. A training seal, maybe, or perhaps placeholder. She gestures for you to press it into the wax. You do. It hisses softly. The imprint it leaves is clean, crisp. You hold it up and examine it. This, you realize, is what tied everything together. Not the horses, not even the messages. This moment when the word became official. When the Empire said, "This is ours. This is truth." This has been seen and sanctioned, and it wasn't always wax. Sometimes seals were made in clay, then baked, hardened to survive days of heat and rain. The recipient would have to crack it to open the scroll. A broken seal without a matching message was treason. Other times, lead was used, melted, stamped, cooled in seconds. You wonder how many fingers were burned making those. The woman across from you, for the record, still has all 10. You follow her to the wall where there's a narrow shelf lined with scrolls. But these aren't waiting to be sent. These are false scroll straining models for those learning how to detect forgeries, because of course there were forgeries. Rival factions, foreign agents, disloyal nobles. Some tried to replicate the seal, but it wasn't just about shape it was about pressure, angle, material. Each seal, like a signature, was unique. And even if the design looked right, if the pressure was off by a hair, if the wax cooled too fast, or the stamp was unbalanced and inexperienced, sealer could spot it immediately. There were rumors that some senior sealers could even smell a forgery, literally detect the wrong type of wax. You believe it. As you move toward the exit, you pass a display case. Inside, a scroll untouched for centuries, sealed on both ends, never opened. Its label, it's intercepted, never broken. You shiver, because that's the kind of silence that roars. A message no one ever read. A truth that died sealed. A moment of power lost to time because someone failed to open it or chose not to. You wonder what it says. You don't break it, of course, but you think about how many messages in your own life have gone unread, unspoken, sealed in hearts, not scrolls. And you wonder what empires were lost, simply because no one dared to look. Back outside, the sun has shifted. Long shadows stretch across the path like spilled ink. You start walking again now. When you picture a courier, you don't just see the rider or the scroll, you see the layers. The woman who carved the seal, the apprentice who smelled the wax, the elder who taught the difference between genuine and false with nothing but a fingertip. You understand now. The Persian postal system wasn't just about messages. It was about proof, trust, the weight of being believed, and that changes everything. By now, the road feels familiar, like an old friend who doesn't talk much but always shows up. You've walked far enough that your body doesn't complain anymore, just moves, automatic and obedient, as your mind drifts deeper into the layers of the empire. But up ahead, the silence is broken, not by bells this time, or wind, or whispering memory, but by the pounding of hooves. You step off the path quickly, heart quickening, as a courier rides past, up dust curling behind him. In a ribbon of tan, he's fast, very fast. His tunic plastered to his chest, face locked in a 1,000-yard stare. You catch a glimpse of the pouch strapped to his side, sealed scrolls bouncing in rhythm with each gallop. And then he's gone. But this time, you follow. You take the side path he took, barely visible under the tall grass. A shortcut, perhaps. Or maybe something more ... urgent. The trail leads you down a ridge and into a hidden enclosure flat. Rocky and strangely empty. But on the far side, built into the rock, is something astonishing. A stable. But not just any stable, this one is. Carved into the mountain, cool and shaded, with narrow channels for airflow and slots cut in the stone for feed bags and water troughs. No frills, no comfort. This was built for speed. Welcome to the Horsevolta key piece of the Persian postal machine. You've read about these? Maybe someone muttered a half-truth in a documentary once while you scrolled through dinner options. But here it's real. This was where the fastest horses were kept. Bred for endurance, trained for obedience. It's fed better than most couriers, probably. These were the engines of empire, capable of galloping full stretch for hours before needing rest. You walk past empty stalls, some still littered with tufts of hair and worn bits. Hooks on the wall bear hanging harnesses, some inlaid with brass, others plain but clean. Efficiency over style, but it wasn't just horses. There's a workroom. Behind the main stalls, inside, Stacks of saddlebags already packed and labeled. Water skins, waxed pouches, grain cakes, oilcloths, emergency medicines, and yes bells. All prepared in advance so that riders spent seconds at the station, not minutes. Think of it as a Formula One pit stop, but with more hooves and less carbon fiber. As you walk through, you remember that speed wasn't just desired, it was documented. Each leg of the journey was timed. Riders signed in and out. Horses were swapped every 25 to 30 kilometers. And the Empire had estimates for how long each stretch should take based on elevation, season, and DS horse personality. There's even a chalkboard at the far wall with faint writing, target, 5.6 leagues before sundown. Horse 12, sulfur mood, difficult, you chuckle. Even in ancient times, someone had to write difficult next to a horse's name to warn the next poor rider. Some things never change, but the real story here isn't the horses, it's the choices. Because when speed was crucial, the Empire adapted. They used what worked, no matter how odd. Some regions used horses, the others used hawks, trained to carry tightly bound messages across narrow river valleys. In the marshes, where hoofed travel was slow, they used foot runners barefoot and wrapped in linen to avoid swamp leeches. Trained to move fast and light with scrolls strapped under their arms like second skins. And when terrain made even that impossible, boats, camels, even fire signal torches lit in sequence to convey pre-agreed messages, a primitive tweet, if you will. Very limited characters, extremely flammable. But the point is this: the Persian system wasn't rigid. It was modular, flexible, built to accommodate whatever the land demanded. You step outside again and feel the wind on your face dry, cracked with sand. The stable behind you settles into stillness, and the hoofprints of the courier are already fading in the dust. You stand there, suddenly aware that the Persian postal network didn't rely on any one method. It relied on everything: horses, humans, memory, bells, fire, ink, seals, trust, and above all, an unspoken agreement that no message was too small to matter. That the system worked not because of fear or force, but because enough people believed in it. It's hard not to admire that. You begin walking again, and your legs feel stronger somehow. From rest, but from understanding. Ahead, the land dips into greener fields, and you glimpse what might be another station. Maybe with a desk, maybe with someone who asks the same question you've heard all along: courier or spy? And maybe, just maybe, you're ready to answer. The landscape flattens into a patchwork of fields, greener than any you've seen so far. Rows of barley, tufts of millet, date palms that wave like tired dancers in the breeze. You hadn't realized how hungry the dry land behind you made you. Until now, this is agricultural territory, a place less romanticized in the tales of empire, but absolutely vital. You're walking not through history's headlines, but through its footnotes. And as it turns out, the footnotes feed everyone. The path here is smoother, more worn. Couriers must have passed through constantly, the earth packed down by their endless urgency. But they didn't ride alone, because here, along the quieter stretches of road, messages weren't only delivered between kings and generals. They were delivered between governors and granaries, between tax collectors and temple treasurers, between harbor masters and barley counters. And let's be honest, none of that sounds thrilling until you realize how icily a missing shipment of grain could spark a riot or a famine, or worse. A letter from a disappointed satrap. You pass a humble way station. You're barely more than a clay structure and a horse post, but something catches your eye. A message board, mounted beside the entrance, and on it, orders, notices, warnings. 1. Declares an upcoming grain tax adjustment. Another reports an outbreak of locusts along the southern canal. Third is a personal notice. The scribe who left figs in the sunroom, please return. We miss your poetry, you smile. Even higher among numbers and quotas, there's room for personhood, for messages, connection. not just command. And the scrolls themselves. They were different too. You find one resting on a small table inside. A scroll made not of parchment, but of palm fiber, coarser and more durable. Cheaper, yes, but designed to survive the humidity of marshland storage houses and the rough hands of farmers who had no time for silk-wrapped dispatches. But don't mistake simplicity for insignificance. A single scroll in this region once prevented a famine. You recall the story now? A delay in irrigation meant barley fields were drying up. A message sent through the Angarium made it from a remote outpost to Susa in time for the canal gates to be opened 3 days early. Harvest saved. Crisis averted. There's a carving on the wall here. Faint, half-worn. A hand holding a wheat stalk, rising like a torch. You reach out and trace it, because this was part of the system to not just the glamorous parts. The Postal Service wasn't designed only for palace intrigue or military command. It was designed for continuity. A harvest reported meant a tax calculated. A tax collected meant soldiers paid. Soldiers paid meant borders held. And somewhere, in the middle of it all, a dusty scroll carried by a tired horse. You exit the station and continue walking. Up ahead, you see a small village. Few homes, a shrine, a granary. A cluster of children runs across the path, laughing. One of them stops, waves a hand, and points at your pouch. Message, they ask in a dialect you barely follow. You nod. Because what else would you be carrying? They grin, then race off again. You watch them disappear into the fields, kicking up dust like tiny couriers themselves. And in that moment, you realize something. The Empire didn't build this road for power. It built it for presence. So that even the smallest village, the remotest outpost, the most faded name in a ledger still felt seen, connected, valued. You pause by the road to rest under a tree, watching the wind bow the barley in long, graceful arcs. And somewhere far off, you hear a soft chime, a bell. Someone else is coming. Someone with a message. Or maybe just a reminder. You are not forgotten, even here, especially here. The sun dips lower, casting long golden lines across the road. The air is warm but softened now, like bread just pulled from the oven, dry and comforting. Stretch, adjust the strap of your pouch and keep walking, and then almost out of nowhere you arrive at a station unlike any other. Its larger, taller ceilings, open archways, no doors. A breeze moves freely through its corridors. You step inside and immediately feel the shift in atmosphere. No scribes bent over parchment. No horses snorting in stalls. No smell of wax or leather. Instead, silence. A woman in a long robe steps forward, eyes kind but sharp. She doesn't ask if you're a courier. She doesn't need to. She simply says, "You're just in time." You follow her past the archway into a large central room where several people are gathered around a polished stone table. On it sits a single scroll case, resting atop a folded linen cloth. The group is whispering not out of secrecy, but reverence. And when you hear what they're discussing, you understand. It's a peace message. An original. One of the rare times the Persian courier system didn't carry news of taxes, orders, or supply requests, but something more powerful. A plea for stillness, for silence. For an end, you listen. The scroll was sent decades ago from a border province on the edge of rebellion. The message it carried, brief and precise, called for withdrawal, not attack. For talk, not force. It made its way to Susa in just under 8 days. 2 days later, war was averted. You'll remember what they say. A message that prevents a battle is heavier than a sword that wins one. Some historians still argue about this one. They say the rebellion was never serious, that the scroll didn't matter, that the decision was made before the words even arrived. But everyone in this room knows better, because messages don't need to shout to shape the world. They just need to arrive in time. The scroll is opened carefully, like it might evaporate. If touched too harshly, you catch a glimpse of the script, bold but not ornate, written in the common tongue. not in palace dialect, accessible, intentional. And then the woman turns to you. She gestures to another case sealed, it's unmarked, heavy in her hands. "We're sending a copy forward," she says, "to remind those ahead what's possible." You take it. The weight is unfamiliar, but not overwhelming. It's not yours to read, only to carry, and maybe you think that's what most messages are, not declarations, but reminders of what's been done, of what can still be undone. You leave the station and continue down the road, the scroll tucked under your arm like a gentle command. The light is changing fast now. The shadows of the date palms grow longer, curling across the path like tendrils of ink spilled from the Empire's open hand. And you think about the road behind you, about every bell, every hoofbeat, every scroll that carried something fragile in instruction, a secret, a poem, a plea, but none more fragile than this: peace. You pass an old man sitting by the side of the road. Watching the sun go down, he sees. The scroll nods once and says only, "If they open it, the world will change." Then he looks away again. You don't ask his name, you just keep walking. And as the sun touches the horizon, you feel it in your chest. Not adrenaline, not pride, but something smaller, quieter, hope. Because even a message can be a second chance. The sky is molten amber and violet, melting into one another like ink dropped into water. The last stretch of the royal road rolls out before you, empty, quiet, and golden. Every step feels intentional, sacred. You're not hurrying. There's no need. This isn't the beginning of something urgent. It's the echo at the end. You crest one final rise, and then you see it. Susa, not the whole city, just its fingers reaching westward. The watchtowers, the outer walls, a sliver of rooftops glinting in the last light of day, smoke from evening. Fires rises lazily, as if the whole empire is exhaling, and even from here. You see them couriers, riders flowing in and out like blood through the arteries of civilization. Changing horses, swapping scrolls, kneeling for approval, it's vanishing into dust. You don't walk into the city, not yet. Instead, you pause at a carved stone marker just outside the gates. A sort of milestone, though this one bears no numbers. Just a phrase chiseled deep and clean. Here ends the road, but not the message. Sit beside it and remove your pouch. Inside, still intact, is the bell you found at the beginning of your journey. It hasn't rung in hours, but its silence has become something comforting, a companion. Like a bookmark tucked into a story you aren't quite ready to finish, you lie back, sky stretching above you like parchment unrolled across the heavens. And you remember all of it. The riders, the whisper couriers, the scrolls soaked in oil, and carried in storms, the unseen queen. The training halls where words were memorized like prayers. The man who vanished with the sun. The peace that arrived just in time, and it hits you not as a grand revelation, but as a gentle certainty. This wasn't just a delivery system. It was a belief system. A belief that truth matters, that time matters, people, even people. Without names matter, enough to be remembered, enough to be trusted, and maybe most of all, that words, when carried with care, can outlive the empires that created them. You sit there as night folds itself across the land. The wind picks up, tugging gently at your sleeves, like a quiet reminder that it's time to let go. It's a kind of letting go that doesn't erase, but preserves. That says, you've arrived. The message is safe. You can rest now, so you close your eyes. The sound of distant hooves grows softer. The scent of sand and scroll wax fades, and slowly, gently, the road disappears.